Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
This would have fine power.
And if the hippies and the yippies and the disruptors of the systems
of the Falkland Islands and their dependencies remain British territory.
That the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima.
Good evening, and welcome to Today in History. I'm Matt Datillo. Today is March 18th, 2010, and this is episode 432. Well, the 500 for 5 campaign continues. In case you're new to the podcast or listen randomly, that's my attempt to have 500 episodes done by May 16th, which is the 5th anniversary of this podcast. By the way, if you're interested in having some of those old episodes, please visit the mattstodayinhistory.com site, which has a donation link on the left-hand side of the page. You'll find that has two purposes. Excuse me. Number one, if you'd like to make a donation to the show, which is always appreciated. Or two, if you'd like to order a DVD. The cost is $20 in the lower 48 states and $25 everywhere else. I haven't done a question and answer show in a while, so I thought tonight might be a good time to do one. The volume of email I receive has increased about 5-fold since we began the 500 for 5 campaign, and some of the questions are nearly identical. I've chosen 5 of them to answer with the assumption that if 2 or 3 people write with similar questions, there are even more people out there with the same thought. The first question concerns the fate of frame 313 of the Zapruder film, which we discussed in episode 424. If you recall, Abraham Zapruder sold his film to Life magazine on the condition that the publication never show frame 313, which shows the impact of one of the rounds to the back of the president's head and its resulting exit in gory detail. Zapruder believed the American people should never be shown the horror that he witnessed. When the film was shown on television for the first time, in 1975, frame 313 was back in the picture. In 1968, a U.S. District Court had ruled that use of the Zapruder film came under the rules of fair use because of its historical and societal importance. Thus, no one who used the film after that was under any obligation to take out the offending frame. Interestingly, the first time the film was shown to a public audience of any kind was in a courtroom in 1969 during the New Orleans trial of Clay Shaw, which was recreated in the 1991 film JFK. Of all the shows I've recorded, I probably received the most comments about the story of D.B. Cooper and his subsequent jump out of a hijacked airplane with $200,000 into one of the most densely wooded and remote areas of the United States. And so the question is asked, what do I think happened to Cooper? Well, put simply, I think he walked away and started a new life somewhere. Cooper's strict instructions to the pilots indicate to me that he intended to jump at a specific time when the aircraft was over a specific point. All he needed to know was the plane's direction, airspeed, and time of departure, all factors that he controlled. My guess is that he either had an accomplice on the ground or a stash of clothes, food, and hiking equipment somewhere near his jump point. I believe he was an experienced parachutist and former soldier, perhaps even special forces. He had about a 12-hour head start on any pursuers, enough time for someone with evasion training to cover a significant distance, maybe even 15 miles. At some point, he arrived in a small town or met up with his accomplice and made his escape. If he is still alive today, he would be a senior citizen, probably 70 or so years old. I receive a lot of email from people who want to start a podcast of their own and who ask what my setup is for recording the show. It's very simple. I have an Audio-Technica Model ATM61HE microphone, which hasn't been produced in several years. That plugs into an M-Audio fast-track audio interface, which connects via USB to my PC, which is now running Windows 7. For recording, I use Audacity version 1.3, which is free. I've tried other software, some of it fairly expensive, but I find I can produce better results with this simple and well-written application. Question number 4 concerns my career. This query comes mostly from people who either began listening to the show recently or who pick and choose episodes based on their interests. The question is whether or not I am a history teacher. I'm not. I began college as a history major, but I allowed family members to convince me that a degree in business management was much more practical. I deeply regret that decision. But through a series of twists and turns in my life, I ended up working in IT, or information technology. I work for a medium-sized company in Louisville where there are only 3 of us in the IT department. This means I do everything from helping to manage the network to handling help desk calls to working on the owner's home computers. Finally, several people with whom I am friends on Facebook have asked me where the initials TLK come from. It stands for the lovely Kelly, my wife of nearly 12 years. I began using that term of endearment early in the life of the podcast after hearing a radio talk show host use the term fetching whenever he mentioned his wife. It seemed like a sweet idea. Without the lovely Kelly's support and patience, there would be no podcast. She's been especially understanding during the 500 for 5 campaign. Well, that's it for this evening. I love getting email from you. If you want to contact me, please feel free to do so. My email address is mattstodayinhistory@gmail.com. You'll find a transcript of this and previous episodes of this podcast at mattstodayinhistory.com. You'll also find me on Facebook. Do a search for Matt Dattilo. That's MattDattilo. Thank you very much for staying subscribed, and have a good evening. We'll talk again soon.